Hi, and welcome to Overflow Chat. I'm joined by my friend Rosie today as we look at this topic of doubts. We're going to be thinking about what doubt is and defining that a little bit, whether it's wrong to have doubts, and thinking of some helpful ways of dealing with that, some do's and don'ts, and practical applications from that. So, Rosie, hi.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting.
I'm so excited. I just tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what do you do, what's your chat?
Um, so my name's Rosie. I work with university students and help them in sharing their faith at university. So for a charity called UCCF. And I live in Norwich normally. That is where I'm kind of based. But I originally grew up in North London in Enfield. Um, Yeah, I love Norwich. If you know anything about Norwich, is kind of a place where you either know or you don't know it. Um, it's got really great, rich history. Really recommend visiting at some point if you've never been before. But I'm a huge fan.
Great. No, thank you so much for being here. The reason I brought Rosie on to discuss this topic is because in conversations I've had with her, she sent me a wonderful spoken word about this particular topic, which I'm going to link in at the end. And I just thought, who better to have this conversation with? So this is just to chat through some of these things. And the first question that I thought we would think about is, I guess when people think about people having doubts, depending, you might be watching this and come from a Christian background, or maybe you don't, or maybe you're not even a Christian and you're just wondering how Christians navigate this kind of thing. So just tell us a bit about like your background. Did you grow up in a Christian home? How did you engage with questions of doubt? Were you encouraged to kind of question things, or yeah, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So my upbringing, my dad was and still is agnostic. My mum is a Christian, and so my life was kind of this mix of these two influences. Um, and I grew up very much considering both quite strongly. My dad was very much firmly in the camp of I don't know and I don't care. A little bit less so now. I think he's much more open to conversations. But my mum loves listening to different viewpoints. She's very open-minded, likes listening and reading a lot of non-fiction and fiction, but quite private about her faith. So my understanding of Christianity mostly existed outside of our house. So my younger sibling and I grew up going to a C of E school. We grew up going to church. We were baptized as babies. We have Christians, extended family Christians on my mum's side. One kind of memory which really encapsulates this for me was I remember going to school, going to Sunday school, drawing a picture, colouring in a picture of Noah's Ark and bringing it home and showing Dad. And I was like, Dad, look what I drew. And he said, question everything you know. I was like, okay. And so it very much kind of made it clear to me. There were positives and negatives to both, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The positives are that it was very much clear to me that I could doubt my faith. I could question things. There was a lot of room to explore and to look. But it was kind of very mixed signals, mixed messages. Yeah, so it's interesting because I think I often hear the stories the other way around where it's a Christian family where you're told it's very much encouraged that you will remain a Christian or feel like there's no room to explore. Whereas for me, I think the member of my family who was least open to ideas and exploring them were the atheists in my life. And the Christians, whenever I would go to church, they were really open to hearing my questions and discussing them. And again, it depends on what kind of school you go to, but I think a lot of the new atheism movement had very much weighed its way into our school, and people would say, oh yeah, you're just a Christian because you've grown up in a Christian family, when I just knew that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it was very kind of a mix of two worlds, but I was leaning more towards the Christian side because I felt that it was a little bit more open. And that's me being honest. Doesn't mean that Christianity is right. It just meant that it was a place which I felt a bit safer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think you're right in terms of people just assume, well, you've never really thought this through. You're just a Christian because, that's what you've been taught. That must be, I would love to be a fly in the room just to be like, well, no, actually not. So yeah, no, that's helpful, I think. I think we're going to talk a little bit about both of our experiences with doubts, in terms of personal stories. But just before we do that, how would you define like doubt? What kind of doubts are they, and what does that look like? How? Yeah.
So I was thinking about this question because I think there's a very strong idea of what I think doubt is, and so I'm really happy to be wrong about this. And it's quite difficult to categorize because I really think every experience is totally unique.
Mm-hmm.
But I can kind of see there are two sorts of doubt which emerge from when I have conversations with people. I also really enjoy listening. I don't enjoy it, but I like listening to stories of people who have left the Christian church and who have gone through experiences of doubt. I find that really helpful to sort of work through the kinds of questions and situations which people have. And so having conversations with individual people, listening to these kinds of stories and from personal experience, I can kind of see like two key ones emerge. And the main one, which I think is probably the thing we think of most when we think of doubt, or at least it's one which I think of, is intellectual doubt, where you have this kind of coming into contact with new information or evidence which challenges your understanding of God's existence, or a new piece of evidence which just about God which doesn't seem to fit reality. And so it's this trying to understand, trying to reconcile these ideas in this world and where God fits into our current understanding. So easy example would be, is the Bible just a bunch of fairy tales? That's definitely was probably the primary one for me, because of the way that my dad talked about the Bible. When I got home from school, I was like, which one is true? Is either what the Christians, when they say that they think that this is relevant and that it's a crucial part of life, or it's a bunch of fairy tales. It can't be both. And then there are other kind of forms of that. And then I think another form would be emotional doubt. So this is difficult to explain, especially if you've never been a Christian. This kind of doubt doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So emotional doubt is when you feel like God isn't there. And this person might kind of intellectually assent to him existing. They might agree with the nature and character of God and what he's like, but they feel like God has abandoned them in some way, that he doesn't care about them, that he doesn't love them. And this is really, really difficult to explain if you haven't been a Christian, because it is a personal, intimate relationship with God. And when you feel like that has taken a hit in some way, that's, I think, when emotional doubt hits. And it's normally when going through suffering. Could be as a result of burnout, that you've just been doing lots of Christian stuff, but you've not really been focusing on God himself and the good relationship that comes from that. So it's a kind of like a struggle of trust, where you feel like God's not really there for you, not just that he's not real.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Like having some of those categories, because I think you see both of those in the Bible as well. And from my own kind of lived experiences, I would say as you were describing that, I was like, yes, in terms of my own experience of the doubts I've experienced, it has been a combination of both of those things, actually. Maybe different to you, Rosie. I grew up in not only a Christian home, but a Christianish country. I say ish because that's another story. But it's essentially, the culture, Christianity was like part of the culture. You went to church, that was the normal thing. In fact, if you didn't go to church, you were met with suspicion. And that's the context in which I grew up. And then I moved to Scotland, which is a very secular country, and I was 14. And I moved about 2 months after the death, like sudden death of my dad. And I arrived, and I'd never genuinely heard of, this idea of atheism, or that people thought God wasn't real. Like, that was just a novel idea to me. So when I went to school and the RE lessons were making fun of people that believe the Bible, it was like a let's make fun of Christianity session. I just found that really hard. But I didn't have the answers because I'd never asked those questions, because I'd never had to. And so I kind of wrestled with that kind of intellectual. And the Bible, when you mentioned about the Bible and is the Bible reliable, and that was another big one, because I was like, well, I kind of live my life, foundation of my life is on that, because I became a Christian when I was about 12, 13. So if it's not like legit, then like nothing is legit. Like, what's the point?
Yes.
I don't want to believe in something that's not true. So yeah, absolutely wrestled with that. And I was not in a church at the time that encouraged questions. You were told, if you question things, you're not a Christian, you just needed to have more faith, and all sorts of unhelpful teachings, I think, as well. And then maybe in my late teens, when I started to wrestle with these questions a bit more, the emotional doubt started to come in, because then I had almost like a delayed response of grief to what had happened and the circumstances of my dad's death and other deaths in the family. And just thinking, even if this is true, is God good? Is this a God that I can trust in?
Yes.
And so, so I think I experienced certainly both of those things. And my my journey through that was a combination of discovering material that I read for the first time that answered these questions and wrestled with them. I was like, whoa, what is this? Reading books and watching videos, and then I thought, okay, a part of the emotional doubt as well was then thinking that there was a better life outside of Christianity. So I went a bit out of like the party lifestyle and tried that for a little bit. It was very short-lived because I felt empty at the end of it. I was just like, okay, whatever the alternative is, this ain't it, I'm out. And then so that's what made me start to like look and investigate, like, let's start from scratch. Like, let's forget everything. Let's start from scratch intellectually. Is this something I can believe in? And when I became convinced intellectually, then I started to wrestle with the emotional side of things, and went to the Bible, studied the book of Hebrews, which, if anybody's read the book of Hebrews, is quite heavy and intense in parts, but it's full of encouragements. And I would say the big message of Hebrews is, Jesus is better. And keep going. Jesus is better, keep going. So that was a journey, and that I think most people don't know about, because I think they know the post-doubt Inonge. Because I then became like super passionate. I was like, Jesus, everybody knows Jesus is amazing. So I think lots of people met that version of me, but like what came before was, oh man, just a long journey. So I think those categories actually, both of those, I can totally relate to them. Have you had yourself, in terms of what's been your own experiences of doubt and where that came from and how you wrestled and walked through that?
Oh, mate. I know you've told me that story before, but I was like, I love hearing it again, especially like intellectual doubt and emotional doubt, because I think they can come together, and as you were saying, that they can collide, but you kind of sounds like you dealt with them sort of one at a time as well. And sort of like unpack the intellectual doubt and the emotional doubt. Oh man, I relate so much to the intellectual doubt and kind of delving deep into Christian books. Like I got really into what is known as apologetics, which is basically like the reasons for Christianity, and looking at the evidence for it. I didn't know that was what the word was, but I just remember going to like finding Christian bookstores for the first time, and picked up a book on Case for Christ, which I think had been talked about at the front of church. It was the first time reading sort of evidence for the Gospels, for the kind of archaeological evidence. I was like, this is a thing? Like, I just didn't know that Christians could go and look at the archaeological evidence and look at kind of copies of scripture and things like that. I lived in London, so I remember making my mum take me to the British Library, where you can see different versions of the Bible, and realizing that, yeah, you can actually look at these copies, have a look and see whether there's been any changes over an extended period of time, and have a really strong idea of what the originals looked like. So therefore looking at the reliability of it. But yeah, I remember that started me on a journey of looking into those things. And I've like, you know, there's all kinds of areas which I've enjoyed looking into, like Christianity and evolution, and about women in the Bible. What does it mean for, like, is feminism the complete antithesis to Christianity? Like, I'm still exploring all those different ideas. And I feel like my faith gives me room to do that. And my faith gives me room to do that because of the disciples. I remember watching, my dad got us to watch The Life of Brian. Have you ever seen The Life of Brian?
No, not
Okay. It's not like standard Christian watching. Basically, it's a comedy sketch, which is about kind of a parody of like how people ended up following Jesus. And they saw this guy who was actually kind of a good teacher, and they started following him, going, "You're the son of God, you're the son of God." And he's like, "I'm not the son of God." And his mum says, "He's not the son of God, he's a very naughty boy." And I remember like dad showing us that, and you read the Gospels and you realize that the disciples weren't following Jesus immediately thinking he was the son of God. They were following him having absolutely no idea or understanding completely of what this guy was about. They were constantly sort of just confused and baffled by what this guy was doing. One hand, they were like, "Yeah, he could do miracles, he's brilliant, like he's going to overthrow the Roman Empire." And then at other moments he talks about dying, and Peter's like, "No, you will never die." And it's just this, they're constantly understanding and falling into what it means to follow Jesus. And I think that's where I've been at with my faith, is when I've hit a season of doubt, I've discovered better reasons to remain a Christian. And I think I just relate to the fact that actually the disciples were in a similar situation. When it came to emotional doubt hit me like a bullet train. I thought I'd like experienced doubt before. But emotional doubt, I was in a really like good place. I was studying theology. It was really just an excellent kind of period of my life. There was nothing obvious at all, which meant that I had any reason to doubt my faith. Had really great Christian friends, and just suddenly knelt on the floor, tried to pray, and just felt the weight of these four walls, and that there was nothing else there. And it was when you're so used to like closing your eyes and knowing that God's there and that you're talking to him, and then you close your eyes and you feel like he's not there anymore. It felt like this absolutely massive rip between the reality I thought I knew and what I was experiencing. And it meant going to church was awful, because hearing people talk about how much they love Jesus and how close their relationship was with him, and I felt like he'd left me. And I just couldn't understand what was going on. I really struggled to go to church, and I just couldn't go because these people were worshipping this God who I felt like had just abandoned me. And I couldn't read the Bible. Prayer felt like the worst thing in the world, because it felt like I was just within my four walls, and it was awful. And I couldn't understand why God had done that to me. But I remember I was in this house actually, in a different room, and I was thinking about leaving my faith because I couldn't go to church anymore. I really struggled with talking to my Christian friends. I was wrestling with, should I just give up my faith? And the one question which I got stuck on, I imagined like all different scenarios, and I imagined talking to my non-Christian friends and trying to explain to them that I wasn't a Christian anymore. And they said, "Oh, so you're a Christian because you've stopped believing it's true." I just remember thinking, no, I've not stopped believing it's true. If you were to ask me, do I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he died, rose again, I would say I believe that. it just feels like it's the most emotionally difficult thing and I can't get through it. And I just couldn't explain to you why. I thought that's a really stupid reason to give up being a Christian, because even if it's hard, I have to keep going if I think it's true, or else I'm not being intellectually honest with myself. Yeah, so I remember deciding, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep being a Christian, but I'm going to need help. And so asking Christians for help. And the next day, literally the next day, I was at a lecture at my college, and the guy was speaking about doubt. And he talked about his experience of doubt and what he went through. And he said something similar to me, where he's like, I didn't stop believing that it was true. I was like, I've gone through, it had been like a year where I've been wrestling with this. I was like, I've been through this entire thing. No one's talked about this experience that's like my experience. And he said, it's like you're sick. And if you're sick, you can't eat very much, by which he means you can't read the Bible very much, you can't pray. But if you stop eating, you'll die. So his kind of suggestion was to like do things bit by bit, read the Bible bit by bit. I could go to prayer meetings. I found that I could live my faith vicariously through other people. So I always went to prayer meetings because I felt like I had that connection with God because these other people had connections with God. But I didn't like church meetings. Yeah, so it was just a really weird experience. And then finding out that you're not the only person to experience that. And knowing that actually when you see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he really did experience a huge emotional rip, and a rip that actually I will never experience, where the Father did turn his face away from the Son and he'd done nothing wrong. And I was like, I thought that Jesus went through that experience, so I would never experience that. So I still have questions. I still don't quite know where what happened, but it's made me sort of trust God a lot more and being a lot more vulnerable, but also knowing that the church is there for a good reason. But yeah, it's not fun when you kind of burst into tears and you're like, God just isn't there. I don't know why.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I think this links into what I wanted to ask next, which is just about, I guess, so is it wrong to have doubts? And, do we see examples of doubt in the Bible? And I know that's something that comes through in your spoken word that I think is helpful maybe to tap into.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Psalms, big influence. Job, love the book of Job, a man who's clearly upright, clearly good, much, much better man than I could ever be, if you read about him. And yeah, he just, he goes through extraordinary suffering, asks God why, doesn't necessarily get a response, but God answers directly and gives of himself. I think that's a theme throughout scripture, of a God who doesn't necessarily give easy answers, but gives himself. And we see that through Jesus as well, that we have a God who doesn't give us necessarily short answers, but he's a God who's willing to suffer with us and suffer for us. I think seeing that there were really solid Christians who have been through similar, Spurgeon's Dark Night of the Soul, John Piper talks about his experience of doubt. C.S. Lewis talks about his sorrows and suffering. And so I think I took quite big comfort in that. Like, what books of the Bible other than Hebrews? I love that Hebrews is like a key cornerstone book for you.
Yeah, I think, just on, I guess, the suffering, the emotional doubt side of things. You mentioned the Psalms, which I think are full of that. I love the book of Habakkuk as well, because it's a dialogue where Habakkuk's like, why? And the Lord's answers to him. And it is that theme of in his grace, sometimes he does kind of give us a hint into what's going on. But a lot of time it's just like, the just shall walk by faith, trust me, do you trust me? And yeah, I see the, for example, you see Thomas in the Gospel of John, who doubts that Jesus is who he says he is, resurrection has happened, and Jesus does give him evidence. And you see that in scripture where God gives his grace or gives relief of some kind or gives some kind of answer, and you see that partially in Habakkuk. But at the same time as
Mm.
that A, that doesn't always happen, and B, he always with that also gives himself. So I think yeah, you see both intellectual doubt in the Bible and emotional doubt, and you see that in different situations God responds almost kind of differently, and I think that helps us see that not every it's easy for me with my experience to project that onto other people, but knowing that people are different, their experiences are different, and actually what they need is different, and I don't necessarily know that, but God does. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love, yeah, Hebrews, Habakkuk. So, Bible books maybe people don't know exist, but
No.
they're they're great, and I think doubt has a role to play. I don't think in and of itself it's like, oh, this is a good thing if that's if that's the end goal. I think it's the direction of where the doubt goes to, that
Mm.
the is good, if that works itself out into better trust, I guess, stronger trust in objectional, so who are the object of our trust
Mhm.
is, and also our faith. Because personally, I I was I was a comfortable Christian. I was a comfortable, cozy Christian. I was that kid in Sunday school that answered all the questions, knew the answers, did all the right stuff. My shoes were always clean, like just on it, like together. And the crumbling of all of that and putting together has made me more confident in the truth of that, and it means I can, like, people sometimes are like, why are you so confident? I'm not confident in myself, I'm confident in
No.
Jesus. Like, my confidence in
Yeah.
him grows ever more with every experience like this. So I think God uses it to shape us and mold us, and sometimes it's better for us, because it means that we depend less on ourselves, our intellectual abilities, our strength, as it were, and we depend on him, which is actually what we're made for. So yeah, I would answer that in the, is doubt good, like yes or no, it depends what it's doing, and where it's going. So I don't know if you have any thoughts to add on that.
No, I think that's really, really good for sure. Like the kind of, as you were saying, like the sort of undoing of like shaking your sort of like comfortable foundations. Because I think I so easily put God in a box. And actually doubt means that as the more I explore of the world, the more I expect to see God in it, even in the really dark stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that's really, really helpful. I almost forgot about doubting Thomas, to be honest. I'm like, oh yeah, that's just such a key passage where he's like, I will not believe unless, and Jesus says, okay, just
Mm-hmm.
put your hands here, have a look. Like he's very much inviting us to do so. But like Thomas's vision for doing that and wanting to do that was he wanted to know the real Jesus. He wanted to have enough trust and faith that he could keep going and really, really trust what Jesus was saying was true. And I think praying throughout that is really key because and just asking for God to keep you. I think for
Mm-hmm.
emotional faith, emotional doubt in particular, there's some ways in which you never kind of really understand the full picture of what's going on, but you just
Yeah.
pray and ride it out, particularly when it comes to suffering. Yeah,
Mm.
and it made me less of a, I didn't realize how independent a person I thought I was. So having to rely on other people, having to kind of just really be open-handed and be vulnerable, which I really hate, by the way. I think I've realized during lockdown how much I really hate being vulnerable. I thought I was one of those people who could be very open all the time. I'm really not. I really, really hate being vulnerable. So there are good forms of doubt. There are bad ways of dealing with doubt, and there are good ways of dealing with doubt as well.
Mm-hmm. We've touched on some of them as well, but the last thing that I wanted to think about, I guess, is helpful ways, because you've just said that, the helpful ways of
Yeah.
dealing with that. What are some do's and don'ts? I guess maybe addressing this to the person that's going through doubt, do's and don'ts, and also maybe somebody that's getting alongside somebody like that, a friend
Mm.
or relative. Do you have any? I know you do, so I want you to just share them.
Well, here's my list. For sure. I think if you're a person going through doubt right now during the pandemic, I really feel for you. Like, this is a really awful time to be going through it because it's a particular time where relying on church family, relying on friends is especially hard. And it's also perfectly understandable. I think if I were going through doubt and then the pandemic hit, I would really struggle to tune into online church. I would struggle to be the person to reach out to friends. And so I want to acknowledge that it's really hard. And if you're struggling and you're finding it really hard, I feel for you. I think to work out where the damage has been done, for sure. So Gary Habermas asked himself the question, other Christians, like I did, asked myself the question, do I believe that Jesus lived, was crucified, rose again from the dead? Do I believe that Jesus is the Son of God? And if the answer to any of those is no or not sure, then I think your faith has taken like a real massive hit. In a lot of ways, but then you know where to explore, you know where your questions are. If you have questions in the periphery of that, I think you could be a little bit more open-handed with it, in the sense of so for example, this is just me, I still cannot reconcile kind of science and evolution and my faith completely. To me, I haven't found a resolution that makes perfect sense. I've heard a lot of them. I'm not completely satisfied. But I'm satisfied in lots of other areas where I think Christianity makes the most sense. I still think it makes more sense than atheism. I still think it makes more sense than any other worldview that I've come across. And so just kind of checking in with yourself and seeing where you've taken the hit. If it's emotional doubt and you're struggling to read the Bible, just leave the Bible open. You don't have to read it all the time. Just leave it open in the house. You might kind of glance across it when you're cooking or in any other place. Just leave it open. Stick to the Psalms. Keep it short and simple. Like my like the lecturer said when I heard him speak on doubt, you're sick, you're feeling ill. You don't have to eat a lot, but you have to eat enough in order to live. Tell a friend. It's really hard. Sometimes they're not going to give a reaction that you like. They're not going to understand. But kind of ask them, be like, hey, look, I'm going through this thing. I'm really struggling with my faith. I don't understand what's going on. I don't know. I don't really want answers. I just know that I'm struggling to go to church at the moment. Would you mind calling me after the live stream to chat? And just have that and have that accountability. That might be a really difficult thing for you to hear if you're like, I don't feel like I have my Christian friends around me, or for whatever reason feel distant from your Christian friends. Try, I know it's hard, and pray about who to ask. I think often the people who kind of came to mind initially when I prayed were the right people to go to. Yeah, Joseph Solomon, his poem on doubt, super, like really inspired me. Listen to things like that. Listen to stories that help you to not feel so alone. God on Mute is a really good book. Reading Pilgrims Progress. C.S. Lewis, he has a section in Screw Tape Letters, which I really find helpful. But yeah, I don't know if you'd have anything to add with that.
Yeah, I think just what you say there about the small things and the simple things. When you talked about praying just short prayers for God to sustain you, one of the powerful ways that looks ordinary that God sustains us is through his people, through his church. And so one of the things when you're going through doubt, you don't want to be in church, don't want to go to church, and you don't want to hang out with church people. But in one sense, they're the people that you need to help you through that. And so I do feel for people who are maybe not in a great church, because maybe they're not the right people to help you with that. They're maybe gonna make things worse. So I think the community and finding a friend that loves Jesus and also cares about you and isn't going to I don't know, make you feel inferior because of your questions is key. And praying for God to bring those people in your life. When I was in a church where that wasn't there, God just brought through student mission evangelism on campus other people along that were not necessarily in the church. And so if you don't have a good church where that might help, pray for God to bring people along that might do that might be out with that. But the simple means of grace, prayer, short, help, keep me, and good
Yes.
people and friends. I think are key. And I think if you're helping somebody, I like what you said earlier, just about everybody being different. Don't assume. Even off the off the back of this conversation, we're not doing this so that you can be like, right, got it. Are you going through emotional doubt? Right? Is it intellectual? And trying to like break it off. We're having this conversation just to give you a rough idea, but
Yeah.
don't try and be like, it's not formulaic. People are people, and people are different, and their experiences might not even make sense. It's just about being there, listening, answering if that's what they want, and entrusting them to God as well. So that would be, I'm a fixer, so my temptation is to be like, what's your question? I'll give you an answer. And that's always, it's not always what people need. So yeah, pray for wisdom and discernment about how the right way of going about that. But I hope this video is helpful. And I'm just going to add the spoken word that Rosie did, and I hope that you enjoy it. But thank you so much for coming and chatting with me about this. And yeah, if you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments below. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I remember that night. The night where God just disappeared. I turned to talk to him. The feeling of rejection winded me like a high-speed train. My knees buckled. I lay there on the floor, gasping, looking for words I didn't have. I tried again to reach out, but like a phone call going to voicemail, there was no response. Lucy opened the wardrobe expecting Narnia, only to find it was gone. Where did you go? This abundant life you brought me into has become a desert. The well I've once drank from has dried up. Out of the tap comes only sand and scorpions. When I try to drink, I only get stung. To pray feels like being dragged over nails. My skin snags on the spikes. My heart has become callous. Nothing grows there anymore. I ran from your word. I've chosen numbness over chasing you. But I cannot live like that either. I keep coming to the door again and again. This time, I'm the one knocking. I could go elsewhere, but where else do I go? Is there another place labelled Fountain of Life? Who else knows my very being like you do? And I keep opening the wardrobe again and again, because even though Narnia is not there any longer, I cannot deny that I never met Aslan or walked in the forest of snow. I cannot deny that what you said was true, because just because the sun is eclipsed doesn't mean it was never there in the first place. Like John Watson to the grave of Sherlock Holmes, I can only say you were the greatest man I've ever known, and no one can convince me you told a lie. I stand by the tomb. Every time I check, it's empty. I know you're alive. Others say you are. I see the grave clothes collapsed and folded, so why don't you appear to me in the locked room? Or talk to me on the Emmaus Road. I'm not fearful of the Romans. I'm just fearful I will never see you again. If anything that I have is a barrier, take it out of my hands. What reward is there to be gained apart from you? Did you redeem me to leave me here? Answer me! Answer me. This silence surely doesn't amount to this. Speak. Dear one, I have spoken. You know I have. Hear me. Hear me like the God of Abraham and of Isaac, who lamented in an ancient language older than the language of your nation, was like the prophets of Yahweh I speak. Speak very breath into your lungs. Give power to nations and take it away. I'm above every understanding, every authority. Only the wisest of men are the ones who exclaim, who can comprehend him? I give wisdom to the lips of babes. I speak above and through whomever I choose. You think you've seen empires, you have yet to see mine. Speak in life into old words. I'm at work even whilst you're dreaming, dispensing peace to those in turmoil, turning weariness into strength. Have you seen this? Have you seen the moment when God sends his peace? You think all this has missed you. You think I've forgotten you. My dear, the wind of my spirit has not passed you, for look around, I am moving on every side. You are in the eye of the storm. Stay put, batten the hatches. I have not left you. My kingdom will come upon you like a hurricane. Stay by the fount, stay by the wardrobe. For I will burst the scorpions from their pipes, and you will be met with an oasis your eyes will not be able to see the limits of. You need not stray far from Spare for Aslan will roar the doors down. My sun was ripped into, like the curtain was ripped also, 4 inches thick, split, the boulders broke, their waters parted, there is one way, all else is death, it is already finished. No, my voice,